Colton Cowser is back, and John Mabry has been added to the coaching staff. But can either of these guys help turn this Orioles season around? We'll talk about if that's maybe the case coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Tuesday, June 3rd, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I am your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, after the O's had the off day on Monday as they traveled out to the West Coast to begin that swing here on Tuesday night, wanted to get you some Orioles news and notes. Got a big return for the O's. Talked about how the Orioles are getting healthy soon. Colton Cowser is finally back. We haven't seen him since March. Talk about what his impact to the roster will be. But that's been some trade-offs with some other injuries lately with Mullins and Mountcastle heading to the IL. We'll talk about what the Orioles are doing in the lineup without those two. And then finally, the O's, after firing Brandon Hyde and Tim Cousins, they have made an addition to their coaching staff. The veteran player and coach John Mabry began his Orioles tenure in the dugout on Sunday. We'll talk about what he can bring to a very young staff in that Orioles clubhouse. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So let's first talk about really the biggest news of the day and probably the week for the Baltimore Orioles. And that is on Monday, the Orioles officially activated Colton Cowser off the 60-day injured list and placed him on the active roster. He was eligible to return on Saturday, but the Orioles wanted to give him a couple of more days on rehab in AAA. They said last week that he would join the team at some point on their road trip, and it's nice to see that he will be joining at the very beginning of this road trip in Seattle tonight. Now, he's been out since the fourth game of the season. In Toronto, fourth game of the year, broke his thumb diving into first, trying to beat out a play, something that's slower and causes injury, and it happened with both because he was out and he got hurt, and it was a fractured thumb. And he didn't get surgery, but it was really just something where you got to wait for it to heal. So he was out for a while. He started a rehab assignment in Aberdeen a couple of weeks ago. He got that pushed up to AAA Norfolk last week, and he was great. He had a 1250 OPS in 24 plate appearances on rehab between Aberdeen and Norfolk. He was 6 for 11 with 2 walks with the Tides last week. He had a double at 108 off the bat off Andrew Painter, top pitching prospect in baseball. A single at 105 off Mick Abel, one of the Phillies' top pitching prospects, who's now back in the big leagues in the Phillies rotation as well. Like, he was facing major league arms. He had a couple at bats against Nick Vespi, his old friend, this week. They were facing the Phillies AAA team. Made one start defensively in center field, 2 of them in left field when he was in AAA. So getting used to, again, both positions that he will be playing. But it is great to have Colton Cowser back. Cooper Hummel was DFA'd to make room on both the 40-man roster and the active roster for the O's. Tough week for Hummel, who had 1 plate appearance, 1 or 2 innings in the field, and got DFA'd twice by the Orioles in a week. He was initially signed, then DFA'd when Adley got hit in the face. Then he was re-signed briefly to replace Cedric Mullins on the roster. Didn't play a whole lot. Now, he was kind of one of 2 pretty obvious moves to make when Cowser came back, and that was the one as Hummel is gone. But getting Cowser back is huge, and especially because Cedric Mullins, Ramon Laureano, and Tyler O'Neill are still all on the injured list. And it really helps your defense to get Cowser out there in either center field or left field every single day as he returns. And Cowser might get like an extra day off this week, more than he usually would, just to make sure that thumb is all right. But you're going to see him out there pretty much every day. And what this also means is, especially with Mullins out, I mean, we had to see a lot of Jorge Mateo in center field over the weekend, since Mullins went on the injured list on Friday. But it means you're really only going to play one of either Heston Kjerstad or Jorge Mateo in the outfield at any given time. And now you have the opportunity to put neither of them out there if you want to put Ryan O'Hearn in the outfield to get some more, free up first base for Coby Mayo and DH for someone else, whomever it may be. But these are all good things for the Orioles defensively, because the outfield defense has been a mess. And I know it's been 3 games, but without Mullins out there and without Cowser out there, right? Colton Cowser probably should have won the Gold Glove in left field in the American League last year. He finished second in that voting. he's an elite defensive left fielder, and he's turned into a much better defensive center fielder. And that is the other thing, because ideally until Laureano and Mullins return, which could be in the next week or so for the Orioles, Cowser and then Dylan Carlson, who's playing great defense and is really swinging the bat well over the past 2 weeks, those two are going to split left field and center field. It's basically going to depend on the ballpark. Whichever, I'm not really sure whichever one. They seem like pretty equal center field and outfield defenders, so it's whichever one the Orioles feel more comfortable with putting in left versus center. But those two are going to play the two toughest outfield positions. And then you're probably still going to see Heston Kjerstad out there in right field with Jordan Adams still being on the roster. He'll probably be a late defensive replacement in games when the Orioles are winning for Kjerstad. Again, he's doing nothing defensively or offensively, but there's still space for him to play and the Orioles to get him at bats and try and get him out of this funk. So you'll probably still see some Kjerstad in the outfield. I doubt we're going to see much Mateo in the outfield now that Cowser is back and again can play center field. But once Mullins comes back, and again, we'll talk about this later, but it should be kind of a minimal IL stint for Cedric Mullins. He probably takes Kjerstad's spot out there. And then when Ramon Laureano comes back, hopefully that's in the next week or so, even though Carlson's playing well, Laureano was swinging the bat so well when he got injured that he kind of takes Carlson's place in that outfield and you set up in a much better spot. Mullins, Laureano, Cowser, and Carlson kind of roaming as your fourth outfielder. That feels a whole lot better offensively and defensively than what the Orioles have out there at the moment. Cowser, we'll see how the bat plays. He didn't get a great start to the season. He was 2 for 16 in that Blue Jays series before he sustained the injury. It was a great year. Should have won Rookie of the Year, but it was certainly a roller coaster first full season in 2024 at the plate for Cowser. He was fantastic defensively the entire year. So he'll bring you good defense, and we'll see what it looks like at the plate, right? It might take a couple of games for him to get back into the speed of Major League games after being out that much. So I wouldn't expect him to give you a 2 for 4 with a home run and a double here on Tuesday night, but the Orioles will get him back into that groove. And it'll also be interesting to kind of see where he hits in this lineup. The O's lineup is it's so left-handed right now with O'Neill and Laureano and Mountcastle all on the injured list. Like, at least they are, probably going to get Coby Mayo out there every single day, but you do not have a lot of right-handed bats. And you're trying to split up the lefties at the top a little bit. And between Holiday and Gunnar and O'Hearn and now Cowser in the mix, you're trying to split those guys up, but also know they're 4 of your, 5 best hitters on the roster right now. So it's kind of interesting. You don't want to hit them all top 4. That makes you really susceptible to lefty relievers late in the game, but you also don't want to put Cowser down in the 7 hole, at least after he gets his feet under him, because he's too productive of a hitter to do that. So I think he'll probably hit around 6th at the beginning, and then we'll kind of see where the Orioles go with him. But certainly makes this team so much better to have Cowser in the box, out in the field, and the glove especially is just going to vastly improve this current Orioles outfield defense. But activating Cowser on Monday was not the only roster move the Orioles have made lately, because although Cowser got them healthier, they've got Mountcastle and Mullins now on the injured list as well. So we'll talk about the fallout from that, what the Orioles roster kind of looks like at this point. That is coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you will find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. And if you need help with an order, that's where Supply House comes in. They offer expert support and industry-leading service, so you will always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trademaster program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trademaster program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, you can use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's at supplyhouse.com. So for the Orioles, they did get Colton Cowser back on Monday, DFAing Cooper Hummel off the roster to make room, but there were plenty of other moves the Orioles made over the weekend that I just wasn't able to get to on the show until today's episode. So let's start with the big one. The reason why, while getting Cowser back is great, it's not as fulfilling as it would have been, because 3 days before Cowser comes back, Cedric Mullins gets placed on the injured list. And Mullins had not been the same hitter he was in April. He had a really bad start to May. He was 1 for 31. The bat had started to pick up over the past couple of weeks of the month. But on Friday, Mullins was placed on the 10-day injured list with a right hamstring strain. Now, Tony Mansolino said it's a minor injury, and he expects him to only miss the minimum 10 days. So at that point, you are looking at, I think math would be right, maybe a next Monday return. Sometime early next week, you would expect Cedric Mullins to come off the IL. He didn't play Monday or Tuesday for the Orioles, and it was kind of weird. He had sat in 3 out of 4 games, and the Orioles said he was just kind of beat up. You could tell something was happening, whether it was off the field, sickness, injury, whatever, and it turns out something with the hamstring. Mansolino said he got beat up in that doubleheader last weekend in Boston. And so now we'll see. Hopefully it is that minimum 10-day stint, because if they can get a healthy Mullins back with Cowser back, you just, as I mentioned in the first segment, you just feel so much better about this Orioles offense, both defensively and offensively. Now, replacing Mullins over the weekend, Dylan Carlson started 1 game in center, and Jorge Mateo started the final 2 out there. And then we recapped on yesterday's episode all of the yikes moments from Jorge Mateo defensively in center field. Now you get Cowser plus Carlson, and those two will split the center field duties. Now, I wouldn't have mind seeing a prospect center fielder in Jud Fabian maybe getting a call over the weekend to take those center field at-bats instead of Jorge Mateo. But the reason they didn't do it is because they knew Cowser was going to be back Tuesday. Didn't feel it was worth clearing up a 40-man spot to give Jud Fabian basically 2 starts and then send him right back down to AAA. Instead, they did DFA their third catcher, Chadwick Trump, over the weekend, so he is off the roster. But you're going to get Carlson, you're going to get Cowser. I highly doubt you're going to get Mateo in center field again now that Cowser is back, and especially with Mullins and Laureano being hopefully back soon. There's really not going to be a lot of spots you wouldn't think to put Jorge Mateo out there. The Orioles might find a way, but I kind of hope not. Now, they did over the weekend call up Jordyn Adams to take Mullins' place. Adams, a 25-year-old right-handed hitting outfielder who is great defensively in all 3 spots. The Orioles had signed him to a minor league deal this offseason. Former highly ranked prospect. He was a former first-round pick out of high school by the Angels. He made 78 big league plate appearances with the Halos in 2023 and 2024, but hit just 176, had a 36% strikeout rate, and he hadn't been great in AAA this year with the O's. 136 plate appearances, hitting just 212 with an 84 WRC plus in Norfolk. But he plays good defense. 14 starts in center, 15 in left, 4 in right for the Tides. And so he gives you center field depth. And that is what the Orioles wanted defensively, because they knew, even with Carlson, they kind of knew, hey, without Mullins and before Cowser gets back, we're going to have to start Mateo at least once. And they ended up doing it twice in center field. They probably figured that, hey, let's get somebody up here who we know can play center field defensively. Probably not sold at all on the bat, but we're not really going to use his bat. And that's exactly what happened this weekend. In both games that Mateo started in center, Jordyn Adams came in the 9th inning as a defensive replacement, in a save situation in both games in the 9th. Now, I don't even think he had a chance. No balls got hit out to center in those 2 9th innings, but he's clearly a defensive upgrade over Mateo out there, and that's why he's on the roster. Now, it was Hummel who got DFA'd for Cowser, so Adams remains on the roster for now. So that is intriguing. There's a chance Adams could stay until Cedric Mullins or Ramon Laureano gets activated off the IL, whoever comes first. It'll probably be Laureano maybe this weekend. But there's a good chance Adams doesn't even start a game while he's up here, and he's just here to be a defensive replacement. As I mentioned, you'll have Cowser and Carlson out there, but you're still going to have to start either Kjerstad or Mateo or O'Hearn in the outfield to play that 3rd spot. Adams is still here to be the defensive replacement for whichever guy that is in the 8th and 9th innings, because he's a gigantic upgrade defensively over all those 3. And hey, you have an open roster spot to give it to him. He gives the Orioles a better chance to win ball games when they are in them late. But it wasn't just Mullins on the IL this week. It was also Ryan Mountcastle, who is now also on the 10-day injured list, also with a right hamstring strain. Mountcastle, Mullins, Arias, Westberg, all have suffered hamstring strains. 3 of the 4 of them are still on the injured list with those injuries. Just everything that has gone wrong, seemingly, that could go wrong, has gone wrong for the Orioles this year. Now, Coby Mayo was recalled on Saturday to take his place. He started both games over the weekend against the White Sox, one as the DH and one as the first baseman. We know he had that interesting base running dust up in the game on Saturday, but Mayo hadn't been very good since he was sent down the last time on May 9th, hitting just 180 with a 62 WRC plus and a 38% strikeout rate in AAA. It's really the first time that he's gone back to Norfolk and actually struggled for a stretch, like a 3-week stretch there while he was down there. Not something you usually see from Coby Mayo, even with the struggles in the big leagues. He's just always kind of dominated AAA, and that is not happening. But for now, Mayo, I think, is going to get true runway. I've said this once or twice before, and he really didn't get that runway to play every day for a while. This seems to be that chance. The Orioles weren't as positive with the messaging about Mountcastle's hamstring as they were with Mullins. Mountcastle kind of injured it when he stole home in that game on Saturday. And so it's not as likely. It sounds like it'll just be the minimum 10-day stint for Mountcastle. So, you're looking at him missing potentially at least a chunk of June here. And with Emmanuel Rivera, he's still on the roster right now, but he probably goes whenever Jordyn Westburg comes back, and Westburg is playing in rehab games in AAA, so he should be close to returning. And Rivera, he stopped hitting. He's hitting like 100 over the last 2 weeks. He's not producing anymore. It's with Rivera not producing, at least in the past, Rivera was producing. That's why he was playing over Mayo. He's just not doing it at the plate anymore. You have to give these ABs to Mayo. Even if it's 2 weeks and then Mountie comes back off the injured list, you have to give these chances to Coby Mayo. I wouldn't even have him worry about third base, right? You already have Ramon Arias here. Westburg is going to be back soon. Don't even worry about third. Just say, Coby, you're either going to play first or you're going to DH. You're going to be in the lineup almost every day, and we're going to have you figure this thing out at the plate. That's what I would do for the next 2 weeks. Then if Mountcastle's okay, I kind of reevaluate what Mayo did in those 2 weeks and base my roster decision off that. But for now, this has got to be the chance, right? This team is 14 games under 500. There's a wide open spot with Rivera not producing and Mountcastle being hurt. This has got to be Mayo's time to get some ABs here. And again, I do think you'll probably see Kjerstad in the outfield, O'Hearn at first, Mayo as the DH in most of these games, except for when Adley's DHing and not catching. So we'll see. Just give Mayo the runway. Again, it hasn't been pretty, but just give him the runway right now. It's going to work out better in the long run. Just give him a shot here out in Seattle this week. And then the last update we did get is that we got a positive one on Albert Suarez, right? Remember, he made that one long relief appearance in the first series of the year in Toronto, got hurt, shoulder injury, went on the 60-day injured list. He's been out for a while. He said last week he's been throwing for about 2 weeks. That's a good sign. Not throwing max effort yet, but throwing from over 100 feet. So, I was worried at one point his season might be over. It seems like that is not the case. So hopefully maybe by the All-Star break, the Orioles can have Albert Suarez back. We know how great he was, both as a reliever and a starter for the O's last year. I have my doubts about him. This stuff isn't great. I think he was potentially poised for this year not being what it was last season, but with the pitching the Orioles have gotten, even with it getting better lately, they could certainly use Albert Suarez. So him being at least on the track to returning is certainly a positive piece of news for the O's. But the other big change the Orioles made, not technically really a roster change, but there is a new face in that clubhouse, right? The Orioles fired manager Brandon Hyde and their catching coordinator, bullpen coach Tim Cousins a couple of weeks ago. And after doing that, they hadn't filled their spots on the coaching staff. Theoretically, they had 2 openings on the big league coaching staff here for a while. And now officially, they have filled one. A veteran of big league clubhouses, both as a player and a coach, John Mabry, is joining the Orioles. We'll talk about what he brings to this team and what this move means for kind of the future of the Orioles managerial role. That is coming up next to finish off the show. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Well, between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start actually building wealth. And for me, it's about the convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. And you can manage money with your partner even smoother with easy collaboration at Monarch Money. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off that first year. So for the Orioles, one final big move that they have made and that became official on Sunday is that John Mabry has been hired to the Orioles coaching staff. Ken Rosenthal in The Athletic first reported it on Thursday, and then the Orioles announced it on Friday. John Mabry has been hired as a major league coaching, I guess, assistant, consultant, whatever it is. He's a major league coach. He's going to be in uniform in the dugout with the Orioles. Now, Ken Rosenthal said, the Orioles still had 2 openings from where Hyde and Cousins were. They're not going to fill the other one, so Mabry's going to be the final move they make. And the Orioles did say the rest of the coaching staff will remain in their roles for the remainder of the 2025 season. Now, Mabry is a local guy. He's a 54-year-old Cecil County native, went to Bow Manor High School, up closer to where I grew up. We always played Bow Manor in sports in our conference, but he's been in the big leagues for a long time. He was a 6th-round pick by the Cardinals in 1991 out of, I believe, Westchester University, and he played 14 big league seasons from 1994 to 2007. Now, he started off great. He was 4th in NL Rookie of the Year voting in 1995, but after that, he really wasn't a great player. He played for 8 teams, 8 years with the Cardinals, then 3 with the Mariners, and then 1 year each with the Cubs, the A's, the Marlins, Padres, Rockies, and Phillies, but he had a negative 2.3 career baseball reference WAR. Like, even though he played 14 seasons, he overall was not really, it was a good player at times, but overall in his career, not that great of a player. Really, his claim to fame, besides playing for 8 teams, was that he was part of the Moneyball A's. The Moneyball A's actually acquired him in May of 2022 in a trade when they sent Jeremy Giambi to the Phillies for Mabry, and Mabry had one of his better seasons of his career down the stretch with the Moneyball A's that year, and wasn't super highlighted in the movie, but he certainly played a big part of that team. And, he played around the diamond, third base, first base, all 3 outfield positions. Also was known for not wearing batting gloves when he was hitting as well. So definitely a baseball lifer. And then he retired after 2007, but he stayed in the game. He was in the, I believe, the broadcast booth for a little bit with the Cardinals. Then they hired him as their assistant hitting coach for the 2012 season. Now, that was the year after Mike Elias left St. Louis. He went from the Cardinals to the Astros in 2012, but in Elias's last year there, 2011, Mabry was around in the booth and kind of around the team in other ways. So Elias at least knows him. Like, there is the connection there between John Mabry and Mike Elias and some of the other guys in the Orioles, or some of the other people in the Orioles front office at this point. But he was then promoted after 2012 as the assistant hitting coach. Mark McGwire left to join the Dodgers staff, and the Orioles promoted Mabry the Cardinals promoted Mabry to be their main hitting coach in 2023. And he stayed there for 6 seasons. He was fired in the middle of 2018, along with Cardinals manager Mike Matheny, when they made a bunch of changes in kind of a disappointing year that July in 2018. So he was out of a job for a year, but then he was hired by the Royals, and he was a major league coach in the Royals dugout, helping with the hitters for 3 years from 2020 to 2022. Then he bounced over to the Marlins. They hired him as assistant hitting coach in 2023. And then he was promoted as the main hitting coach for the Marlins for last season in 2024. But at the end of last year, he was fired along with the entire coaching staff for the Marlins. They let go of their entire staff after the 2024 season. They redid basically everything after last year, and Mabry was a casualty of that. Now, he was on staff in Miami with Skip Schumacher for those 2 seasons when Schumacher was the manager of the Marlins. Both of them have a long Cardinals past as well, so know each other well. Schumacher, who was the 2023 NL Manager of the Year when he took the Marlins to the playoffs, seen as a really great up-and-coming manager, but with the Marlins moving on from Kim Ng, bringing in Peter Bendix as their GM, he kind of wanted to bring in all of his own people, and Schumacher just kind of got caught up in that mess that was in Miami. So it does give the Orioles a Skip Schumacher connection, and he is seeming to be a great up-and-coming manager. But when I did my managerial candidate episode a couple of weeks ago after Hyde was fired, I didn't really mention Skip Schumacher, even though he had that great year in Miami and a lot of people like him. It's because I kind of see him as having his eyes on another job. Now, Schumacher, after losing his job with the Marlins last year, he was hired by the Rangers to be a senior advisor to Rangers GM Chris Young in that Texas front office. So he's not in an on-field coaching role right now. He's in the front office. But my assumption is, and this could be wrong, this hasn't been fully reported anywhere, but my assumption is that he is the manager in waiting for the Rangers. Like, Bruce Bochy came out of retirement to manage the Rangers, won the 2023 World Series, and now has had back-to-back disappointing years. He's 70 years old at this point. Again, he's already retired once, so it wouldn't be crazy to say he's looking to retire for good this time pretty soon. And the fact that the Rangers have a good manager in Schumacher just sitting in a, not big-time role in their front office and potentially ready to just come back down into the dugout, my assumption is that he's just going to get that job with the Rangers. Now, that might not be the case, and maybe Bochy stays on, and maybe the Orioles request and get an interview with Schumacher this offseason, and maybe having Mabry around makes it more likely that Schumacher comes to Baltimore, but that's kind of why I haven't mentioned him. But Mabry still gives you that connection. But I think the bigger thing he gives you is experience, right? He's been 12 years on MLB staffs, plus all that time as a player in the dugout. And I think the Orioles, after firing Brandon Hyde, I haven't done the full math, but I believe they might be the least experienced coaching staff in all of Major League Baseball right now. Like, you have Tony Mansolino, never managed, but 4 years as the big league coach. Robinson Chirinos, your bench coach. Buck Britton, your third base coach, both in their first years in big league dugouts. Anthony Sanders does have 7 years big league coaching experience. Drew French, 4th year with a big league team as a coach, but only his 2nd year as pitching coach. Mitch Plasmeyer, the assistant pitching coach, only 1 year in a big league dugout. Previously, that was last year. Ryan Klimek, who's the pitching strategy coach, only 2 years in a big league dugout. Cody Ashe, your hitting coach, only 2 years in a big league dugout. First time as a full hitting coach in the major leagues. Sherman Johnson, assistant hitting coach, 1st year in the bigs. Tommy Joseph, assistant hitting coach, 2nd year in the bigs as a coach. Grant Anders, who's the last guy, kind of a major league development coach, just his 2nd year in the big league dugout with the Orioles. Like, Anthony Sanders, 7 years in big league clubhouses coming in as a coach, was by far the most experienced guy now on this team because, say what you want about Brandon Hyde, but at this point, he was an experienced major league coach and honestly an experienced major league manager. Like, this was his 7th season managing the Orioles before he got fired and his 15th season as a major league coach in a major league clubhouse. That was way more than anybody else on his staff had in experience. And it really shows you with what the Orioles did with their coaching staff in the offseason that even after the disappointing end of the 2024 season and getting swept out of the playoffs again, it shows you the Orioles did not enter 2025 thinking, hey, if one thing goes wrong, we're letting Brandon Hyde go. I don't think they saw Brandon Hyde as having a short leash heading into this season because the 2 main veterans that he had on his coaching staff that he had to lean on, Freddie Gonzalez, who is his bench coach, former big league manager with the Marlins and the Braves for a while. He had been with Brandon Hyde really since 2020. And Jose Hernandez, who had been a big league coach for a while and was kind of a veteran guy in that clubhouse. The Orioles let both of them go off the coaching staff in the offseason. So they basically left Brandon Hyde being the most veteran guy, and they replaced them with, guys they called up from the minor league coaching staffs and Robinson Chirinos to be the bench coach as a first-year major league coach after just retiring after 2022. So I think surrounding Hyde with a young coaching staff tells you, hey, we're not really prepared to fire you. They're thinking he's getting through this season and beyond, and he's going to kind of help out this young coaching staff build out their careers. And this season just went so sideways that the Orioles felt like they had to make some sort of change, and they made that change with Hyde. So, it is John Mabry now coming in. Again, he's going to be more of just a major league coach. I think, he's never been a major league manager, but just to advise Mansolino and others in that dugout. He'll certainly work with the hitters because he's always been on the hitting side as a big league coach, but I don't think he's not coming in as hitting coach. He's not coming in and taking over Cody Ashe's job. That's not what's happening. He's more of to give like a veteran experience presence as a coach and help out with multiple different things in that dugout. Again, I don't see this being a step to them firing Cody Ashe tomorrow or Mabry taking over the hitters. Quite frankly, he, in his track record, sees things a little differently hitting-wise than Elias and Ashe and those guys do. And maybe that could be a good kind of separate voice to have in that clubhouse as this Orioles offense continues to struggle. I'm not sure it's going to be the biggest, hugest change the Orioles are going to make or at least see with Mabry in there. But I think overall, it's just nice to have a veteran coach because this coaching staff without Hyde is just kind of unbelievably inexperienced without Brandon Hyde in there. And I love the way Tony Mansolino has talked about it, right? He said, hey, I'm going to ask for help from everyone I can because this is new to me. I appreciate him being that candid about it, but you definitely needed more of a veteran guy in there. And it's, we'll see if Mabry's the right choice there. I don't really think he's going to be a candidate for manager after this season. I just think he's kind of a helpful voice to have in there, but at least nice to get another vet in that Orioles clubhouse. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen. Leave a 5-star rating and a review on the show. We're here on YouTube as well. Like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you want to talk ball, mailbag questions, whatever it may be, you can always email me, lockedonorioles@gmail.com. Now, those who have been with us for a little while kind of know what happens on weeks like this. The Orioles head out to the West Coast as they begin a 3-game series with the Seattle Mariners. Tonight, game 1 of that series. For the O's, they will send Tomoyuki Sugano to the mound at 9:40 on MASN 2. He'll go up against George Kirby, who missed most of this year with an injury, came back, and has been an absolute disaster in his first 2 starts back. So hopefully the O's can get to him as well. But as I've talked about in the past, when the Orioles go on the West Coast during the week with my 9-to-5 job, it's just impossible for me to even stay up for the whole game, let alone record, edit, post a whole podcast, and still get enough sleep to go to work the next day. So we will still have episodes for you on Wednesday and Thursday, even though the Orioles are playing 9:40 games on Tuesday and Wednesday. They just won't be recapping the games. Check out Luke and the postcast over there if you want a game recap. We'll be talking about later this week, kind of assessing the flaws and the struggles of some of the Orioles hitters. And we'll also do a look back at the Orioles offseason now 2 months in and how those decisions have aged. But there is a day game on Thursday to finish up this Mariners series. It's a 3:40 game on Thursday. So the episode in your ears on Friday, that will be a full recap of all 3 games this week between the Orioles and the Mariners, and it'll get you ready for the series in Sacramento this weekend as well. So that's kind of a look at the rest of the content. Again, I apologize not being able to recap every game, but just the West Coast games in the middle of the week, it's not doable for me. So I still get you some good content. We'll still be back with an episode tomorrow, just not getting that full game recap. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.